major weaknesses of the program, despite then have specific implementation in the implementation. And I don't know if there's a way for KSP
to have timetables and so on. So,
not my experience.
That's not similar to or different from programs offered by international organizations and other national governments and so on. Because I think that's a much more important part of the whole interview that we can kind of learn from rather than just the history of it, because I can supply the history of it later as well. So
yes.
I'll try to focus on that. Could you tell us your name and official title, please?
Yes. My name is Eddy Martinez. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Export and Investment of the Dominican Republic, CEI-RD.
I understand that Korea's KSP project with the Dominican Republic is entering its third year. Could you go back to the origins of the project and how it started and how it developed over the past 3 years?
Yes. The first thing is I must state how pleased we are with the development of the KSP program over the years. It started, of course, with President Fernandez of the Dominican Republic to the Republic of Korea back in 2006. President Fernandez was extremely impressed with the development of Korea, and in particular, he made a visit to the Korean Development Institute on his final day of stay here in Korea. And then he was even more impressed that not only had the country developed as such, but also that there was a well-documented history and study in depth of the path that Korea had taken. And so he asked me in particular to follow up on KDI and to see how we could obtain some collaboration, some cooperation from Korea so that we could learn from the process. That's how we learned, of course, of KSP, and of course submitted our proposal in 2007. Now, since 2007 on, we have carried on now 3 different KSP programs, focusing on different stages, and they have all been very positive for the Dominican Republic. We started out by looking at the policy orientation and the strategies that are needed to foster a similar growth in the Dominican Republic to that of Korea. What is the basis of that growth? And then we looked at more specific programs. So we started out looking at export orientation strategy for the country. Then we looked in particular some of the main weaknesses that the Dominican Republic exhibits, even today. Some of them have to do with physical infrastructure and with the knowledge infrastructure in the country. So we went from studying not only the overall policy, but also specific policy and infrastructure issues regarding the electricity sector in the Dominican Republic and the human resource or human capital development that are needed for sustained growth and development.
I understand that the consultations have produced a number of recommendations and suggestions. How were they implemented, or were they implemented?
Some of the recommendations have been duly implemented, and some are still in the process of being implemented. I think this is an ongoing process, and you have to recognize that we are still learning in the process. But in particular, we're interested in implementing the policies that can be adapted in the Dominican Republic from the Korean model, but not necessarily an exact copy, but we have to, of course, Dominicanize it in a way. So we have been trying to do such things. For example, one of the policy recommendations was for dialogue between government and the private sector to implement public policies, especially regarding export development. But now we're applying that to other issues as well. That has been, I believe, well implemented in the country. We don't have a presidential roundtable on a monthly basis, but we do have the Presidential Export Commission that has been created following the example here in Korea. So it's very similar, but we have adapted to the circumstances surrounding the Dominican political and economic development of today. So that one has been implemented. We now currently have such meetings, not only at the presidential level, but also at a ministerial level with the private sector. The other thing that's very important that came out of this is a process with KSP is the whole issue of highlighting the importance of long-term and medium-term planning. And we have incorporated a lot of what we saw here in Korea back in 2006, 2007, and 2008, in particular when Minister Themistocles Montas was able to come to Korea and see what the results of such long-term planning and medium-term 5-year plans had done for Korea. And as such, we are implementing what we call the National Strategy for Development in the country, very much based on the Korean experience. And I would say to you, I would submit that this is perhaps the most critical component of the entire process, because we stopped in a way looking at only short-term measures to understand how economic growth and development takes place. And I would say that to a very large extent, that has to do with what we saw here in Korea when Minister Montas and other ministers who are in the planning now of this national strategy were able to see. So I would say that that was a major breakthrough that we learned through KSP. And now the whole country is on the move in the Dominican Republic in this process of implementing a national strategy for development until 2030. This is the first time that it ever occurs. And again, I have to say very optimistically, but also with great admiration for what Korea has done, that this is based on your model.